You're in good shape. 2 walls of water, anything else?
Life and death.
Life and death, man. Y'all are just on fire tonight. Joji, we're really proud of him, aren't we? And so Joji's like, nope, I'm not. And so we're doing that. We're doing those kind of things. Let me ask you. Is this one of those impossible things in the Bible? Children of Israel escaping the armies of the Egyptians. Is this again in our common vernacular? I know Bobby's being real spiritual over here, but in our common vernacular, this is one of those impossibles, isn't it? They should have been dead. In fact, as we walk through this, you're going to figure out just how dead they should have been. It was a mess. Anything else like that? Anything else, one of those impossibles in the Bible? Because we're going to leave here. Ever how you came in feeling, you're going to leave feeling better when we're done. When you get done with Exodus chapter 14 in a second. Anybody else? Anybody else another impossible? No wrong answers here. This is a safe space. What's that? The dry ground, yeah. That's part of it too, isn't it? They didn't go across on mud. Man, when God did, He did so well. They just, 2.5, 3 million people, they just went right across. And on dry ground. That's it. What else? Anything else? Anything else? I'm thinking of a number like 4,000 or 5,000. Is that one of those impossibles? Yeah, it could be. Feeding of the 5,000 men plus their wives, the children, and the neighborhood kids who tagged along too, right? 15,000 plus folks fed out of a little boy's sack lunch. That's pretty impossible, right? That sounds just like the Lord, though, doesn't it? What else? The walls of Jericho. They marched around it 7 times. The last day they marched around it one time for 7 days. On the 7th day they marched around it 7 times. And they blew and they clapped and they did all this. And God did what? That's just fine. Thank you for obeying. Whoosh! There come the walls down. That's pretty good. Anything else? 3 Hebrew children are cast in the fiery furnace. It's so hot it burned the soldiers and they died of exposure trying to put them in the furnace. And God said, boy, I like that really well. I think I'll take care of them. Truth of the matter is, I'll take care of them and I'll take care of them emotionally as well. Because they looked in there and they said, hey, there's 4. There's 3 in there, but there's 4 we see. And the 4th one's like the Son of God. Man, that's pretty good, isn't it? God all the time showing off. What we call impossible is not hard or easy for God. Nobody said the other one I thought of immediately, but anyway, that's just the way I think. Anybody else? You had 2 sisters really upset with Jesus for this one. Lazarus. Lord, don't go in there. It's been so long. He stinks. Can you hear her say it? If you just been here, my brother to be alive. Is there anything like grief, enrage, and disappointment? I think it was everything in her to not pound on the Lord. Can you, if you just been here, what took you to so long? You knew He was this way. And then what'd He do? He weeps and He says those immortal words, Lazarus, come forth. Let me help you. And if He hadn't named him, I like what R.G. Lee said, and if He hadn't have called out Lazarus' name, every human who'd ever been dead would have come back at that moment, right? Because all creation's under His authority. If this is the case, then why do we struggle so badly like we do? And I say we, and I mean the obese man up here in the stripes. Why do we struggle? Why do we struggle when we're surrounded by things? And we're going to see very real, emotional people here in Exodus 14, and I think it's going to help us. Start us off there. Go to verse number 1. And we'll walk through it here together. Exodus 14, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea over against Baal-Zephon, before it shall encamp you by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness has shut them in. Let's do a little narration. I started to get a map, but every time I use maps, I watch people's eyes gloss over like couldn't be any worse than it is. And so, if you're map people, I've got quite a few of them. This is not the right way to go. If they're looking for any military advantage, they don't go this way. And again, you can write that in your notes. This is, Pharaoh hears where they are, because again, there's 600,000 men and 2, 3, 4 million people in this en masse march, and they're going, and they make an unbelievably bad military blunder. They are completely hemmed in. The Red Sea here, the forest here, they've got nowhere to go but die, and Pharaoh's gloating, going, silly people. Verse 4, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh, upon all his host, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. God, I will follow you when it does not make sense. That's what Moses is saying to the people. And the people are going to say amen. They're going to change their tune pretty quickly here in just a second. But I'm going to do this. And God says, I will get glory out of this situation. And it was told the king of Egypt, people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this? We've let Israel go from serving us. You think about it. You think about if almost 100% of your workforce is gone, particularly a workforce you weren't really paying to start with, and 600,000 folks who were servants and slaves and building everything, and all of a sudden they take up and leave, guess what? The middle class is having a fit because they're not going to do that stuff. And the lower class sure don't want to do it. And man, they're just beside themselves, and they're barking at Pharaoh, not in the least of which is that everybody who didn't follow the instructions of Jehovah has been to a funeral or about to have one because the firstborn's all dead. He made ready his chariot, took his people with him, took 600 chosen chariots, all the chariots of Egypt, captains, every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, pursued after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with a high hand, but the Egyptians pursued after them. All the horses, chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen, his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside Pihahiroth before Baal-Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, verse 10, if you don't have a Bible, somebody maybe can share with you. So the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, behold, the Egyptians marched after them. And they were sore afraid, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. And they said to Moses, you big dummy, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt with us thus to carry us forth out of Egypt? Wait for it. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 10 miracles God has done. I mean, in unbelievably recent memory. They gave them food, clothing, and jewelry, and supplies, and said, get out. They spoiled them. They looted them without raising a sword or drawing an arrow. And the people of God are going, it was a lot closer just to die back there. At least my family could have found me back there. What are you doing? I thought if I followed you, Lord, things would get a whole lot easier. But we listened to you, Moses, and you led us out here to die, not of old age or exhaustion. You led us out here to die at the pointy end of the sword. Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt? And you got to love being in leadership when everybody pulls that one out. I told you so. I told you it wasn't going to work. I told you this was going to end badly. Why did we listen to you? Oh, why do we? Verse, read it. Saying, let us alone, we may serve the Egyptians. It had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. We should die. in the wilderness. Let's walk through a little bit. Let's pick out a couple of principles. Let's see where we can go. It's in your notes there. God may allow us to face seemingly impossible situations. I suggest to you tonight that you may be in God's will and in great difficulty. You may be exactly in God's will and in great difficulty. I've replayed this since last week. I began to look over this passage. I've replayed it again. I mean, every move we have ever made as a family, every move we have ever made as a married couple has been met with unbelievable adversity. It has been met with sickness. It has been met with scares. It's just over and over again. We moved to work at the school, at the college years ago. We moved and we brought a newborn home to this place, and we were there, and I'd had to have shoulder surgery, and shoulder was hurting, and rehab wasn't doing well, and doing all those kind of things, and in the middle of all that. The church we were moving from just fairly upset we were moving, and one thing after another. And we moved to a drastic cut in pay, to a drastic cut in a lifestyle, and we moved, and we were so trying to do things, weren't really paying attention, and before we turned around, we owed the bank. We were overdrawn at the bank with a month and a half before I was supposed to start working. Andrea was trying to find something but really couldn't because, again, we had a toddler and a child at home, and we were absolutely positively in the center of God's will, and life couldn't have been any more difficult. And about the time we got done with that, the doctor whisked Riley off to the ICU, children's ICU building at the main hospital in Raleigh, and said he's got to have this $16,000, $18,000 bag of drugs immediately because this virus is attacking his heart. I'm telling you, you can be right in the center of God's will, and everything be very difficult on the outside. The children of Israel did exactly what God told them to do. They went what nobody else thought was the right direction. You can be right there. And we've got an insidious problem. Jackson Watts, Dr. Watts now just finished his PhD. He said it like this. He said, this is more pernicious than the health and wealth gospel. This is the idea that if I serve God, then everything will be okay. And the idea is nowhere found in Scripture. The truth of the matter is you may be serving God and everything blowing all to pieces because God's saying, look what I'm about to do right there. Look how I'm about to help you. Look how I'm about to take hold of you. Look how I'm about to work things out. You just wait. You trust me. You trust me. 10 years, and Brother Glaspie said something, 10 years, man, I try and sit young men down going, look, just because it's hard doesn't mean anything. It may be in this hardness that God's doing some great work in your life. It will be okay. I talked to Allison before she headed back to finish her final weeks of college, and I looked at her and I said, you need to take some time and write down the story that God has written in your life these last 2 years and what He's done and the answered prayer, because that'll be precious to you in the days ahead when life's a little harder still. And they look and, man, this is there. I wrote in my notes, this was not the direct route. I mean, God led them where only He could deliver them. God led them where only He could deliver them. Now I got real happy on my sock feet yesterday. He did it on purpose so He could show off His power. So He could prove to these millions of Jewish people, I'm going to take care of you. It's okay. I'm going to do this in such a way that you can't get any credit, and I'm going to end Pharaoh right now. I'm going to end Pharaoh's army. Can you imagine trying to get to the promised land, get to the land of Canaan, and you've got all of these soldiers chasing you, hunting you? It's a military necessity what's got to happen. It's not the direct route. I suggest to you, don't miss the miracle. Now, I'm the last guy ever get accused of being Pollyanna or get accused of being the silly SpongeBob SquarePants. Somebody told me that's the new Pollyanna. I may look like SpongeBob, but I'm not. I'm the last. I just am. I'm just. Those of you who don't know me very well, I am the last guy. But I want to be this guy. In the middle of great difficulty, God may be setting things up for a miracle. Is there any better news at a funeral than he's alive? Is there any greater news to what are we going to do with 15,000 people? Tell them all to sit down. Let's say grace, and then you guys keep feeding them and keep up with it, because we're going to take the leftovers home with us. Is there any greater news? Man, we got to pay our taxes. Go throw your hook in the water, pull it out, grab the coin out of the fish's mouth, pay your taxes, let's go on and do our business. Whether it's the small things or the unbelievably large things. Let me say it differently. If God doesn't step in, this is going to be the shortest revolution in history. If God doesn't step in, they're going to massacre a whole bunch of people to break their spirits. Then they're going to take everybody back, and it will be unbelievably awful if they don't decide to wipe them all out. Because Pharaoh's really upset. And there's a whole lot of those soldiers there who just lost somebody. Don't miss the miracle. Anybody in here, we got to help God with our situation? Anybody here like that? We can't wait. I got to help God. I'm not saying don't be obedient. Nod your head if you're still with me. You be obedient. You trust God. Craziest things I've seen almost 30 years of ministry. Life gets tough, and people, man, the first thing they do is they jettison their faith. They jettison their faith. They jettison the fellowship of other believers. They jettison the friendship. Somebody doesn't do exactly right in the hospital, or this situation didn't work out exactly well, and then they're just done. They're done. Because God didn't do whatever they wanted on their timetable. If you don't, man, you're going to miss the miracle. You're going to miss the miracle. There's a third thing. Again, if you're taking some notes tonight, you write this down. You obey when you can't quite see the situation, the solution. You ought to obey. If everybody's healthy and you got a pile of money and progress is going well on your second free home, and you got the third coat of wax on your boat, and Joji's made dinner for everybody, you still obey. Let me help you. And if it all goes sideways and everybody's crossed and you don't feel real well and the car's leaking oil, obey. Be faithful to Him, because He's going to be faithful to you. You may not can see it yet. But if you're following God's will, God loves doing this stuff. God is great at this. And how many people, man, they gave up just a little too short. Obey when you can't quite see the solution. There are three purposes here in these first 12 verses, I think. There are three purposes. Let me offer them to you. God has a purpose. He allowed the situation for His glory. God allowed the situation for His glory. That's God's purpose. Verse 4, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and all his army, all his host, and the Egyptians, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. God had a purpose. He's going to get glory out of it. Going to get glory out of it. I've tried real hard not to be always personal, very personal, unless I'm being silly. I've stated, wrote it down, signed it in Sharpie on the bathroom mirror. I don't want any more chemo. I could do some more radiation maybe. I don't want any more chemo. I don't like chemo. That's a bad mess. I think I can say without exaggeration, maybe around Christmas. But I wonder, give or take a week or two. I don't think I've gone. I don't think I've gone more than a week. Somebody called, texted, mailed, or emailed. Input, help, prayer, offer assistance. Call today. Would you come? It's local. I said, yeah, sure. And it isn't anything but the fact that I'm on the other side of something most everybody agrees is not real fun. And I just see God doing all these neat things all over the place. All over the place. And I wouldn't put the family and all that through that again, but I'm telling you, and you be right in the center of God's will and everything be just as sideways as it can be. And God's going, watch what I'm going to do here. Watch what I'm going to do. By the way, that didn't have anything to do with me. I didn't have anything to do to get into it. Didn't have much to do to get out of it. And there we are. There we are. And God's doing things. God's doing things in your life. He's refining you. He's pruning you. He's pulling you. He's working with you. There's the purpose of God, His glory. There's a second purpose that's going on. For the Egyptian army, it was a trap. They had all kinds of things, but they didn't have the weapons to fight them, right? They could have thrown the necklaces at them. They could have hit them in the head with a roll. They could have thrown some dry beans at them, but they were no might. Let me help you. They're on foot. They're in horses and chariots. They don't stand a chance. These are not military men. These are bricklayers and farmers. These are bakers and butchers. They've been serving as the underclass in Egypt. And if they get in a military fight, they're going to be in trouble because it's going to take them a while. Remember, because they've got these small bands as they start going in, and they're going to be training people. And they start talking about these men of war, and they train these people. But they got women and children. It's going to be awful. God said, go this way, because without drawing an arrow string, I'm going to take care of them. There's a third purpose you see here. Third purpose. For the Israelites, for the Jews, they were going to see about the powerful, loving care of God. They were going to find out about the powerful, loving care of God. The powerful, loving care of God. Riley wasn't home, but Allison was laughing at me. I was checking over her car and checking out everything and making sure coolant and oil. And I was doing the same thing to the car Riley drives and all those kind of deals. And Allison, and I said, this is what a dad does. What a dad does, make sure the fluids are there and walk around, check the treads and the tires, see if any wires sticking out. In my car, I check the spoons in the dash, make sure they're holding the dash up and all. You know, some of us have different kind of maintenance items, and I don't think anything about it. And Allison was just having a little fun with me. Well, if a mostly bald, middle-aged man knows to do that for his teenagers, I got news for you. Our loving Heavenly Father, who has all power, just delights in taking care of His children. And with their back to the proverbial wall in the purpose of God, He's about to demonstrate, I am greater than the greatest army on the face of the earth at the moment. And I'm going to do something absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. I got two questions here. Let's see if we can do this. Anybody? How did Pharaoh react? Can you give me a progression of Pharaoh? Start with up to the 10th plague. Anybody? What's his emotional state? Anybody? He says yes, and he takes it back, says yes, takes it back. And then it's just like he's getting more and more stubborn. He's getting more and more annoyed with Moses. You flip a coin. I've got, 120, 125 commentaries on Philippians. I do not have this many on Exodus. By far, 30, 40 at the most. It's not 50-50, but it's pretty close. Is this Pharaoh that Moses knew as a father figure? Is this Pharaoh who would have been his half-brother by this point? There's a level of familiarity and contempt for Moses that indicates they knew each other a whole lot better than two strangers meeting. Almost strangers. Whether it's his half-brother growing up or whether it's the Pharaoh of old. Again, everybody likes to, the Bible just doesn't say, so I don't really take a position. But he's not happy. He keeps getting bugged about this. He's not happy at all. What else happens? What else happens with Pharaoh? Anybody? 10th plague hits. Firstborns are dead. Pharaoh's wife is screaming bloody murder. Everybody's upset. I mean, this is unbelievably awful. And he says, get out, right? What's that? Anybody? It's absolutely anger, isn't it? I wrote down, it's rage, it's grief, it's embarrassment, and it's about to be regret. Because the embarrassment and regret's going to come in, and it's going to fuel that rage, and he's going to say, I'm going to go and I'm going to take them back. And I'm going to chop off some heads for good measure. Get everybody. Everybody stops their funerals. Everybody stops consoling their wives. You get your armor, you get your swords, you get the horses, get the chariots, and we're going after them. And I know what I said. I don't care what I said. I'm going after them. Can you imagine the rage of an angry, bereaved father who has all that military might at his command? And all those other folks who are burying somebody else. This could not be worse situation for the people of Israel. What's happening with the Jewish people? What's happening with the Israelites? Yay, we're free. What'd you do to us? This is the wrong way. And then they do what? Poor Moses, right? What's the matter, Moses? Wasn't good enough for us to die in Egypt? You brought us out here to kill us? Is there anything makes people want to quit, go into business for themselves, move to an island, become a hermit, build a shack out back, buy one of these vans that converted or get an RV and go, I'm just tired of people. I'm tired of dealing with people. And you've seen those people. Like at the end of the day, you go ask them, sir, can I? And they roll their eyes and they go, because they've had all the people they want for one day. Can you imagine millions of people going, that Moses? Let me help you. It wasn't the problem with Moses. They had lost their confidence in God. The Jewish people reacted foolishly. There's a couple of things there in your notes there. View difficulties as an opportunity to glorify God and grow in faith. Now, that is the easiest note I've got on any slide in the last few weeks. Because I'm a whole lot like the people of Israel. I want somebody else to blame for my problems. I want somebody else to blame for my problem, number one. Number two, I want God to hurry up and fix it. I don't want to grow. I've grown all I wanted. I don't want to learn anything new. I just want things to be fixed. I want things to be back to normal. I want things to be like they were. And I will be just as chippy as I want to be. And we look at this and we go, man, those people, they should have known better. They should have done better. How do we do? How do we do when it doesn't go exactly our way? Anybody? Anybody grumble, mumble, complain? Anybody got the PhD in the deadly trinity there? Nobody? Just one of you? Brandon's got 2 hands and a foot up. And, yeah. We're real honest. What do we do? Gray, what was his name? Guy had been twice divorced and decided to write a best-selling book on human relationships between men and women. John Gray. He wrote a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. The book's kind of foolish, interesting read if you're on a plane flight. He said one thing in there that always stuck with me. He said, men, when they don't know what to do, man, they go run into the cave. And he spoke metaphorically. He said they run into the cave. Once they're in the cave, just let them be. When they come out, they'll be fine. He said, but many a newly-wed wife chase after the man in the cave, and they run into the cave, and they forgot that there's a dragon who lives in that cave. And the dragon eat that wife and bite her, and now you got to fight. Instead of him working it out, you got a real fight. And then Gray goes to great lengths in describing things. It's kind of funny here. Man, woman, either one. Man, when we get hurt, wounded, expectations lowered bad enough, we just bite anybody who comes around, won't we? Doesn't have to be man. There's a second idea here. Second idea that is here. Some of this is a good leadership lesson. But anyway, God's got the power to see us through. Verse 13. Moses said to the people, fear not and stand still. Fear you not and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. Again, there's two things here. One, that is a fabulous statement. But isn't that so hard? Just wait and see what God's going to do. Instead of the other is, notice Moses' love for the people. Anybody in here would have been tempted? Hey, the way to escape is over there. Just run right at the Egyptians. At least you mouthy ones there. You know, the 22 of you, you go that way. The rest of us will stay here. You go scout it out. Right? You're annoying me to death. You just go over there. See how it gets you. Verse 14, the Lord shall fight for you. You shall hold your peace. It can be translated a couple of ways there, or the implication is either you will finally get your mouth shut because you're going to see what God's going to do, or you'll finally get your confidence. I don't know what he's referring to, but the first part of the verse is obviously clear. The Lord will fight. The Lord said to Moses, wherefore criest thou to me? Speak to the children of Israel. They should go forward. But thou lift thou up thy rod, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. Miracle 1. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. Behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. They shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh, upon all his hosts, upon his chariots, his horsemen. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I've got me honor upon Pharaoh, his chariots, and upon his horsemen. Whatever time it is, check what's happening. Verse 19. And the angel of God which went before the camp of Israel. Wait. What angel of God? God was ahead of them all the time. Before they ever figured out they were backed into a corner and death was on the horizon, God was already there. God's never led you anywhere He's not already. God's never taken you down a wrong turn, a wrong path. You can trust Him. He was there before they ever recognized what was going on. Removed, went behind them. The pillar of the cloud went from before their face, stood before them. And it came to pass between the camp of the Egyptians, camp of Israel. It was a cloud and darkness to them, gave light by night to those. So the one came not near the other all the night. They should have caught up to them. God supernaturally intervenes. Slows down the Egyptians. Catch it? Whatever has happened, Moses has done this. Water starts doing this. Nightfall into morning. In the movies, Moses does this and the water does that, and they just start walking across. That's a movie. What happens here is, trust me at 6 p.m., trust me at 8 p.m., trust me at 10 p.m. The Egyptians are close. Remember, the Israelites have seen them, the Egyptians have seen them, and then all of a sudden God slows it down. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind, all that. night. And made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. It's just miracles all over the place. But here's what he does. Those mountains that were a problem, and the forest and the desert that were a problem, and the sea that was a problem, God turns them into his advantage, doesn't he? And he sends the wind right through the canyons of those mountains, and he blows in such a way that it's wide enough and dry enough, and he keeps the wind at a certain speed and a certain rate so that it pushes the waters of the walls of water back. And he holds it up. And every Israelite who wanted to got to watch it. You griping at Moses? He's the leader. I've chosen him. Look what he does. Look what starts to happen. The Egyptians are delayed. And all night long, whoosh. And the children of Israel, verse 22, you still with me? Children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground. And the waters were a wall of them on their right hand and on their left. I've been to I've been to an air show that was supposed to have, give or take, 150, 200,000 people. It was just really mob. I've been at places like Disney World and those kind of places where they would have huge overflow crowds. I've been at a state fair in North Carolina where they would have about 120,000 people, and it was just wall to wall, elbow to elbow. But I've tried to even picture, what's it look like 2 million people trying to walk across something? This ain't a small miracle. He's got the water pushed so far back. He's got the land packed down. And they're making a pretty good pace going across there. Someone said, I read, one of the other miracles is that they all listened and they were all able to get their stuff because they all had to get across by a certain time. Amen. Can you imagine getting this many people from point A to point B? That's a pretty good organization, isn't it? Pretty good, a secondary miracle there. And I say that with a smile on the face. And the Egyptians pursued, went in after them in the midst of the sea, even all the fair horses, chariots, horsemen came to pass in the morning watch. The Lord looked on the host of the Egyptians with a pillar of fire and the cloud and troubled the host of the Egyptians. Second time he's going to slow them down. Took off their chariot wheels, so they drave them heavily. So the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. He stopped their progress, made them wait all night to get in there, and they started having mechanical problems. By the way, they're getting scared. And the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their horses, chariots, upon the horsemen. Moses stretched his hand over the sea. He's on the other side now. And the sea returned to strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. They get across. The Egyptians are coming. Ever how long it takes the people to get across there, Moses says he obeys what God has told him to do. By the way, is there anybody in here who thinks that does a whole lot of good? You might get a taxi, might get an Uber, might catch a baseball at the game, but other than that, it's just not much to it, right? But he went like this, and the army of Egypt was defeated because he obeyed God. Verse 28, the waters returned, covered the chariots, horsemen, all the host of Pharaoh. Came up on the sea, there remained not so much as one of them, but the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall upon them on the right and the left hand. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore, and Israel saw the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord. And here's our leadership. And his servant Moses. God can see us through. He has the power to see us through any difficulty. That gets me pretty excited. Because every now and then, man, stuff's just bigger than I am. No matter how many pencils and papers, no matter how many graphs and diagrams, no matter how much Googling I do, man, I cannot figure it out. Anybody had one of those? 2 of those? 3 of those? And God says, I got this. I got this. What should have been all they would ever need to see. And they're going to be stuck before long. I suggest to you, again, if you want to write this down, I think we got to learn to rehearse the blessings of God. This is a problem with them. They just as soon forgot this as they get around the corner. Rehearse the blessings of God. Rehearse the blessings of God. Well, God saved us. Man, your kids, your grandkids, your nieces and nephews, your aunt and uncles, your cousins, people in your immediate vicinity, they ought to know, man, when you came to Christ, they ought to know. We ought to know that, man, and Granddad was baptized back at this church, and they ought to know part of that story. They ought to know, man, when God answered prayer in your life, they ought to know. You ought to rehearse the blessings of God. It's crazy. People find a dollar bill on the ground, and they will tell perfect strangers. But God saves them from their sins, and nobody they know has any clue of their testimony. Isn't that goofy? Man, rehearse the blessings of God. God saved me. He changed me. He's answered this prayer. He's answered that prayer. Young man, I was challenged to keep a record of answered prayer and pass that along. We've tried to do some of that. I've instead kind of turned it into a devotional Bible and all, but my devotional Bible, I wrote stuff in, but we just want to know what's next. Instead of, boy, look what God did. See, prizing past blessings gives us power to face the future. Your personality may be, I can just handle anything, everything, all things come my way. Maybe God's wired you like that, but I can assure you one thing that'll help you. You start to rehearse the blessings of God. Trust God. This in your note. Trust God to see you through difficult situations, knowing nothing is beyond His power and control. I thought discussion somebody involved me in a few weeks ago. I thought again, we have all these opportunities. But we would rather everybody think our life is problem-free than come kneel at an old-fashioned altar. We'd rather everybody think our life is problem-free than just say, man, pray for me. Things are tough. Right? Things are a little difficult right now. Again, I'm not talking about being negative Ned and all that kind of deal. I'm just not. But I'm saying, man, I got confidence that God did it in the past, but I'm wavering a little bit right now. I sure would like for you to pray for him. Sure would like for you to lift us up because I can't wait to see what God's doing. But the truth of the matter is, I get a little nervous waiting. We start to rehearse the things God's done for us. We're in passage in Philippians, Lord willing, Sunday, and Paul is sampling, to use the modern vernacular of songwriting. He is sampling the Psalms. He is dubbing in and grabbing this out and turning it into commands of piety and worship with the people of God there at Philippi, and letting them know that God is in control of all things and He can do this. And as you pray with thanksgiving because of who God is. And your joy is rooted in Him. And your peace comes from Him. And you pray to Him. And He wraps all this up. And He's just got the songs of the psalmist playing in the background in those Jewish ears. And it's new to all those Gentiles. And He's saying to them, I'm telling you, from 2,000 years ago, you can trust Him, and you can trust Him today. And let me help you. And 2,000 years later, you can still trust Him. You can still take your request to Him. Trust God to see you through. By the way, this is not in isolation. And I'm done. It's over. Look. It's not in isolation. There's the people of God. There's leaders in there. There's a visible manifestation of God. There, the cloud and the fire beam at night. He's not saying cross your fingers and hope it works out. Let me help you in 2021. You can check any prophecy you want. They're all right. You can check any historical fact you want. It's there. You can look all you want for a body in a tomb, and He's not there. He is arisen, just like He said. And as he ascended, he'll come back. And all the proof and all the evidence, everything you'd ever want to satisfy your heart and your head is right here, and it's available. Wait for it. And there's all the answered prayer and the changed lives. Rehearse God's blessings. He'll take care of you just like you took care of them. Title of our message tonight, Glory in Dry Ground. I like that. God was glorified. He put them through on dry ground. And when they thought it was safe to pursue, God said, nuh-uh. I told you I would get honor upon you. And I'm going to protect my people, and I'm going to keep my promise because you guys didn't. And I'm going to wipe you out without an arrow shot, without a sword drawn. I'm going to take care of you.